All right, Alexander, let's talk about the elections in Moldova.
Mm.
The elections, I think, went exactly as everyone had expected them to go.
Mm.
The opposition in the lead until the diaspora vote came in.
Mm.
And it was that diaspora vote that clinched it for Maya Sandu, the incumbent pro-EU, pro-globalist, pro-WEF candidate.
Mm.
And the opposition party, I think they've characterized Sandu perfectly in a statement that they made the other day, where they said that she is the Moldovan president of the diaspora.
Yeah.
Not the president of Moldova, but the president of Moldovans living outside of Moldova, with the exception of course, of the Moldovans living in Russia, who, from reports, did not have the access to vote that Moldovans in Europe had. Anyway, your thoughts on the elections in Moldova and what lies ahead for this country?
I mean, they're a very bad outcome for Moldova because what we have is an incredibly unstable situation now there. We have a president in Moldova who is not supported by most of the voters in Moldova. You're absolutely right. If it had been limited to the people who actually live in Moldova, then Sandu would have lost. So they're the people who are affected most directly by the policies that she follows as president. I mean, they're rejecting her. They say that she's the president of the diaspora, which is exactly what she is. I mean, she has won. Her victory was entirely achieved on the back of votes from the diaspora. But it's important to stress it's not the entire Moldovan diaspora. It's the Moldovan diaspora in the European Union, because the Moldovan diaspora in Russia, which is very large, some say 150,000, others put it even higher, 500,000. I don't know what the figures are, but they were only given 10,000 ballots to vote between them. So they were in effect excluded. Now, put all that aside, even if this had just been, the entire diaspora, uniting and voting for Sandu, it is all but impossible, I would have thought, for a president to be able to execute a policy successfully when the majority of the people in her country voted for the opposition, candidate. I mean, her authority within Moldova, of course, the opposition are challenging her legitimacy, but let's put the questions of legitimacy to one side, which are internal Moldovan issues. Her authority, her political authority in Moldova is now going to be questioned, because people who live in Moldova will say, we don't support you. We don't support the policies that you are following. And Moldova is likely, I believe it's scheduled to have parliamentary elections next year. Based on what we have seen, both in these elections and the elections that happened, the first round of the presidential elections and the referendum, it's likely that the opposition is going to win a convincing victory in the parliamentary elections. On these trends, in which case we will have a parliament that is deeply opposed to the policies of the president. As I understand it, within the Moldovan system, the prime minister is the more powerful figure in terms of conducting executive policy. So Sandu herself and her backers now either have to confront that possibility of an unfriendly, indeed hostile parliament, with all the political instability and difficulty that causes, or alternatively, they have to think about some way to make sure that a president and a policy that the Moldovan people who live in Moldova have already rejected somehow succeeds in the parliamentary elections next year. And of course, that might not be an easy thing to do using conventional political processes. They might start to do other things, what are called applying administrative pressures, which of course could destabilize the situation in Moldova even more.
Well, the EU and Sandu being someone who's going to execute whatever the EU, the globalists, tell her to do.
Yeah.
They're going to do whatever they have to
Yeah.
to make sure that Moldova stays on side with the EU, stays on track to enter the European Union in 2030 or whatever the date is, where Moldova is not anywhere near prepared or ready to join the European Union. If you go by the metrics, the qualifications that a country needs. 20 years ago to enter the EU, obviously Moldova is not in a position to enter the EU. You've said that the EU is now a geopolitical project and not an economic project. So, okay, you hate Russia, you can get into the European Union. But my point is that they're going to do whatever they have to make sure that Moldova remains on that path to be part of the EU sphere, because Moldova is being propped up as the big significant win in what has been a complete failure for the European Union, especially with regards to Ukraine and to Georgia. Yeah. And so Moldova is it. This is Ursula's big win. This is the European Union's big win, because everywhere else on a geopolitical level they are failing.
Yes,
they can't afford to have Moldova fail in the future.
That is exact.
With regards to the EU, not the well-being of the people. They don't care about the well-being of the people. They care about the project.
That is exactly correct. I mean, they're going to pull out all the stops to make sure that the parliamentary elections deliver the kind of majority that they want, even though, and I mean, it's important to say this, it's a big win, but it's a virtual win because it's not based on the votes of people who live in Moldova. I mean, obviously there are people in Moldova who support European integration, but it's clear that the majority don't. I mean, they've already had to, in effect, push away Moldovans who live in Russia. I mean, they're not being given ballots. So, I mean, if they're starting to do things like that, then of course they're likely to go on doing even more things. I mean, just to say. So obviously they're going to do that. But of course, the risk is that the more you do things like that, the more unstable the domestic situation in Moldova becomes. And from what I've heard, I mean, there is a very, very difficult move in Moldova already. So very much like happened with another country further east, which is Ukraine, the EU is going to push a project. Remember, most Ukrainians didn't want, at various times, Ukraine to join the EU. Very few wanted the Ukraine to join NATO. Very few wanted Ukraine to break completely with Russia. The EU and the Euro-Atlantic community, as it's called, NATO and all the rest, continue to push all of those ideas onto Ukraine. And the result is the crisis in Ukraine that we see now. And it could all repeat itself. In fact, it probably will all repeat itself in Moldova as well. The astonishing thing about the EU, the whole Euro-Atlantic project, the whole NEACOM project, which is what ultimately it is that they never learn anything. They just go on pushing on. They supported people like Yushchenko and Tymoshenko and all kinds of people, Poroshenko and all these people in Ukraine, in the 2000s with the Orange Revolution and all of that, even though, as I said, anybody who was following Ukrainian politics at that time, myself, by the way, I mean, I wrote about this, could see that this was going to end in a smash. They're going to do exactly the same thing in poor Moldova now. They won't let the people there make the decision. The people who live there, the people who have the most direct interest in how the country is governed, they won't let them make the decision as to the kind of course that the country should follow.
I think the key to for these countries to get their sovereignty back is the foreign agents laws.
Yeah,
I think that's the key, which is interesting because all of this originated, this push from different countries. Turkey's now looking at a foreign agents law. Hungary has one. Of course, we've covered the Georgia Foreign Agents Act, but this all originated with FARA in the United States, and it was used as a tool against Trump.
Yeah.
But now, countries that are pushing a foreign agents bill are countries that are going to expose the collective West, the EU, the US, meddling in their affairs. Yeah. Oh. And if you can stop the meddling, the interference via the foreign agents law into your universities, your NGOs, your think tanks, if you can cut that off, then you're going to stop their ability to influence parliamentary votes, to influence presidential and prime minister votes. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the key to all of this?
Absolutely.
I don't know. That's how I see it. I think that's going to play a big part in countries getting their sovereignty back, which is why Georgia Dream probably pushed so hard for a Foreign Agents Act. It's not going to show Russia meddling. It's going to show EU meddling, and that's the last thing they want to have exposed.
That is exactly correct. That's exactly what's going to happen, and that's why Georgia Dream did that. That's why Turkey is now preparing to do it. And you're absolutely right, also, by the way, in saying that nobody had really thought of a foreign agents law until suddenly FARA, which in the United States had basically been forgotten, was suddenly revived. I mean, it suddenly was reactivated. And everybody at that time said to themselves, well, if the Americans can do it, then so can we. And the first people to copy FARA was the Russians, and now everybody else is doing it. And you're absolutely right, because, of course, the point to understand about NGOs and all of these Western-financed NGOs is that when they enter a society, they change its social and political character, especially if it's a small country like Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, places like this. Because, of course, the NGOs are very well funded. They're able to pay very high salaries. They are able to acquire strong influence over the media. Young people want to work for NGOs as opposed to local businesses. Everything becomes changed and distorted, and a constituency of people, predominantly young people, is created that has an interest in continuing this process because, of course, they are the material beneficiaries of it. And I'm not saying, by the way, that they don't believe it. People will always believe that which is in their material interests. So, I mean, it all comes together in that kind of way. But you're absolutely right. If you pass a foreign agents law, if you expose what these NGOs are, if you gradually drain them out of the system, then politics in your country will change completely. And you really don't need, in that case, to go further and start doing all of the other things, relying on the riot police and things like that, which, in fact, play into the hands mostly of your opponents in the West.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we will end the video there, the Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, like the shirts we are wearing in this video today. Use the code October20. It is still valid for the next week, and get 20% off everything on the Duran shop. Link is in the description box down below. Take care.